My name is Claire Vance. I am 34 years old and I work as a senior forensic accountant here in Chicago. My job is to drag the truth out from behind the numbers. I catch the corporate frauds and financial embezzlements that people so cleverly bury in their files. I once took down the CEO of a massive corporation just by auditing the discrepancies in his travel and coffee expenses. I know that people can lie, emotions can deceive, and tears can be faked, but a balance sheet never lies. Numbers do not cry. And on my own wedding day, when my husband pointed his finger at me in front of 200 guests, I realized what a colossal mistake I had made in misreading the most important balance sheet of my life. Picture the ballroom of a wildly expensive hotel in downtown Chicago. Everything was picture perfect. The orchestra was playing a soft, sweet melody. The scent of white lilies filled the entire hall. Waiters were circulating with silver trays of champagne. Some of the most influential people in the city, business tycoons, and our families were all there. I was wearing a stunning silk gown, one I had been running around for 3 months just to get the perfect fit. I was looking at Mark, the man who had become my husband in a church just a few hours ago. Mark is the co-founder of a highly successful architecture firm. He stood up from his seat, a glass of champagne in his hand. I assumed he was going to make a toast to us, say something romantic that would have everyone clapping. But when he gripped the microphone, his hands were shaking violently. His face had gone completely white, as if he had just seen a ghost or was struggling to breathe. The entire hall went dead silent. Mark looked into my eyes, but there was no love in his gaze. Instead, there was a strange mix of pure hatred, terror, and betrayal. He pointed his finger directly at me, and his voice echoed through the microphone. He said, "This woman is lying to everyone. She is not who you all think she is. She is only here to destroy us all. She is a total fraud." 200 people froze in their tracks. Not a single sound escaped anyone's lips. The waiters stopped dead right where they stood. I felt like a siren had just gone off right next to my ear, muting every other sound in the room. I just stood there. Not a single tear fell from my eyes. Any other girl would have probably broken down crying, screamed, demanded answers, or ran away. But I am an auditor. When a system suddenly crashes, I do not panic. I look for the source code. I just kept my eyes on Mark. He was panting. He dropped the microphone, which hit the floor with a loud, piercing screech, and stormed out of the ballroom. In a matter of seconds, the entire wedding turned into a circus. People started whispering. My mother rushed over to me, absolute panic written all over her face. But my eyes were locked on the other corner of the hall, where Emma was standing. Emma is Mark's older sister and the senior partner at his architecture firm. She had a glass of wine in her hand. There was an expression on her face that I could not quite decipher then, but she did not look surprised in the slightest. She was just watching me, with a very cold, calm, and calculated stare, as if she were watching a play where she had written the climax herself. I walked out of there without saying a single word. I told my mother to handle the guests. I caught a cab and headed straight back to my apartment in Chicago's Gold Coast. This was the same home where Mark and I had been living for the past 2 years. There was an eerie silence in the house. I took off my heavy wedding dress. It felt like a massive burden now. I slipped into a simple gray tracksuit, tied my hair up, and sat directly in front of my laptop. I knew Mark's outburst did not come out of nowhere. Mark is a very calm guy. He never makes a scene in public. Someone had very methodically planted a narrative against me in his head and triggered him at the exact moment I was most defenseless. The very first rule of being a forensic accountant is trust, but verify. I need to backtrack a little so you can understand where the roots of this conspiracy lay. I come from a very ordinary working-class family. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom was a school teacher. I took out loans for my education, worked day and night at restaurants, and built my career from the ground up through sheer hard work. I do not live on anyone's charity. I met Mark 2 years ago at a charity gala. He was a very grounded, artistic, and kind-hearted person. He fell in love with my work ethic, my straightforwardness, and my honesty. When he introduced me to his family, everything seemed perfectly normal. The most important thing in his life was his firm, which he and Emma had built together. Emma was always very sweet to me, almost too sweet. She would buy me expensive gifts, take me shopping, and call me her sister. But the auditor inside me always felt a strange twinge of suspicion about the way she operated. Mark only handled the design and creative side of things, while Emma managed all the financials, taxes, vendor payments, and accounts for the firm. Mark hated numbers and trusted Emma blindly. Many times, when we were out for dinner and the topic of the firm's profits or expenses came up, Emma would very smoothly change the subject. A couple of times, I even asked a few casual questions, like how their tax structure was set up, or why their overhead costs looked so high, and she just laughed it off, saying, "Do not be our personal auditor, Claire. You are just Mark's bride-to-be. Leave the numbers to me." Clouded by love, I ignored those red flags. I figured she was just a bit overprotective of her company. That was my biggest professional and personal failure. I was ignoring a critical vulnerability. The 3 days following the wedding. For 3 whole days, Mark was nowhere to be found. His phone was off. Even his friends had no idea where he was. I knew he was probably hiding out in some hotel, likely drinking himself to sleep. During those 3 days, I did not call a single soul, and I offered no explanations. I had turned my dining table into a war room. I drank countless cups of coffee and just stared at the screen. I initiated a digital audit of the firm's public records, tax filings, business registrations, and every document available on open-source databases. Mark had given me access to a few joint accounts before the wedding so we could manage household expenses. I started pulling the threads from there. The first day was just scratching the surface, and everything looked normal. On the second day, I started digging into the vendor lists that Emma would occasionally mention in passing. I checked their state licenses and registrations. At 4 in the morning on the third day, when my eyes were burning and my brain felt numb, I found it. The breakthrough. I found an offshore shell company. A pattern that had been hidden with incredible cunning, but could never escape the eyes of an auditor. I had been staring at that dance of numbers on the screen without sleep or food, and I suddenly understood exactly why Mark's hands had been shaking in that ballroom. On the night of the third day, the apartment door clicked open. Mark walked in. The sight of him would have scared anyone. His eyes were bloodshot and swollen, his hair was a mess, and he was still wearing the same suit from our wedding day. He looked completely shattered. He collapsed straight onto the couch and buried his face in his hands. He was breathing heavily. I got up from my chair and went to stand right in front of him. I did not ask a single question. I did not ask where he had been. I did not ask why he did what he did to me. I just waited for him to speak. When people are drowning in guilt and confusion, silence forces them to talk. Mark started talking through his tears. He said, "Forgive me, Claire. I am broken. I do not even know why I am alive. I do not know what is true and what is a lie anymore. My brain just is not working." I asked in a completely flat, emotionless voice, "Why did you do that on our wedding day, Mark? What were you shown?" With trembling hands, Mark pulled some crumpled papers from the inside pocket of his jacket and placed them on the dining table. They were color printouts of some bank statements and emails. He took a deep breath and said, "The night before our wedding, Friday night, Emma came to me. She was crying. She said she did not want to show me all this, but she had to save me." Mark pointed at the papers. According to these emails, you were collaborating with my biggest competitor architects to leak our firm's data and our client lists. Emma told me you were on a rival company's payroll. It said that you were only marrying me so you could gain full access to the firm's internal accounts, bankrupt the company, destroy us, and walk away with all the money. Emma even showed me a statement for an offshore account with your name on it, showing hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred over the last year. She told me that if I married you, I would lose my business, my career, and my entire life. Claire, she is my sister. I was so terrified, I felt so betrayed that I lost my mind. I thought you were a monster. I picked up those papers and examined them very closely. It was a masterpiece of forgery. The emails used my name, mimicked my vocabulary, and even threw in some forensic jargon to make them look authentic. To an average person with no grasp of accounting, it was incredibly easy to believe. Emma had taken my quiet nature, my professional demeanor, and my very line of work, and weaponized them against me. She had spun a narrative where I was a greedy, cold-blooded corporate spy. I looked at Mark. He looked utterly destroyed. Any other time, I might have yelled at him. I might have slapped him for believing fake papers fresh off his sister's laser printer without even bothering to ask his bride, the woman he had lived with for 2 years. But anger is a useless emotion. Anger does not win cases. Evidence does. I walked over to my desk and brought back a thick, heavy manila folder that I had compiled over the last 3 days. I placed it on the table, right next to those forged papers. Mark stared at the folder with his bloodshot eyes and asked, "What is this?" I said in a very calm but authoritative voice, "This is the truth, Mark. These are the numbers that do not cry and do not resort to emotional blackmail. You never showed me your company's balance sheet, but you did give me access to our joint accounts. And from there, I found a tiny trail leading to the firm's vendor payments." I opened the folder and slid the first page in front of him. I asked, "Did you know that for the past 5 years, your firm has been paying $80,000 a month to a supply and logistics company that literally does not exist?" Mark squinted. He could not make sense of it. I flipped to the second page. "This is a certified public record from the Illinois State Business Registry, Mark. That supply company has no office, no employees. It is nothing but a shell company. And do you know who the sole signatory, the sole owner of this company is? Emma Brooks, your sister." The breath hitched in Mark's throat. He was staring at the papers, his eyes wide. I continued, not a single tremor in my voice. "Your sister has been stealing money from the firm's accounts for the last 5 years. It is called embezzlement, Mark. Fraud. She has siphoned off nearly $3.5 million through that fake shell company by now, and all that money is funneling straight into her personal trust." I showed him every single bank transaction I had traced through public filings, tax records, and cross-referencing. I explained it to him line by line. I said, "Emma knew you were marrying me. She knew exactly who I was and what I did for a living. She also knew that after the wedding, sooner or later, I was going to look at the household and firm financials. For me, catching that fake company was only a matter of hours. Emma's theft was about to be exposed. She was going straight to federal prison. She had to stop this wedding at all costs. She had to get me away from this family." I leaned in a little and looked dead into Mark's eyes. "That is why she attacked your heart. She spun a fake story against me, fabricated fake evidence, because she knew you are an emotional man. She knew you would be so deeply hurt that you would leave me, probably never speak to me again, and the firm's accounts would never be audited. She did not save your company, Mark. She used you as a pawn to save herself from prison, and you let her do it." The silence in the room was so profound it felt like someone had created a vacuum. The papers slipped from Mark's hands. He was just looking at me. The fear on his face had vanished, replaced by a kind of agonizing pain that shatters a person's soul from the inside out. The sister he had blindly trusted, the sister he had built an empire with, had weaponized his name, his love, and his life for her own greed and self-preservation. He asked in a shaking voice, "Claire, how did you find all this?" I stood up straight and said, "Because my name is Claire Vance, and I audit the truth." Emma made the biggest mistake of her life. She tried to frame a forensic auditor, and she did it with fake paperwork. Mark dropped to his knees right there on the floor. He broke down sobbing. He was crying like a little child. He was begging for my forgiveness, cursing himself, pulling at his own hair. I felt a fleeting moment of pity for him, but I did not help him up. Some mistakes cannot be paid for with tears. When you buy into a story without asking questions, you have to endure the pain of the truth that follows. I said, "What happens next is entirely up to me, and there will be no arguments." I did not put on a show of calling Emma or getting into a screaming match with her. I do not believe in pulling hair or shouting matches. I believe in paperwork. I compiled that entire manila folder, all the evidence, all the transaction details, and the shell company records into a docket. The very next morning, I couriered that entire file to the IRS and the FBI's white-collar crime division. Simultaneously, I filed a lawsuit against Emma for defamation and forgery. When you hand over a tax fraud and embezzlement file backed by concrete evidence to a federal agency, and the file is prepared by a senior accountant, they move incredibly fast. It was just 2 weeks later. I found out the details from Mark's lawyers afterward. Emma was sitting in her lavish glass-walled office, leading a major meeting. That is when 4 FBI agents walked in. They brought the meeting to a dead halt. All of Emma's assets, her bank accounts, and her house were frozen on the spot. She was frog-marched out of her office in handcuffs, right in front of her own employees. I heard that even as they were putting her into the back of the police cruiser, she was still cursing my name and screaming that I was a witch. But I could not care less. Paperwork never curses back. It never argues. It only speaks the truth. Emma was hit with so many charges that she was looking at a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. Mark testified against his own sister in court. His firm took a massive financial hit. He had to sell a large stake in his company just to pay off the vendors and government penalties. But with the truth out in the open, he at least narrowly escaped total ruin. Now you are probably wondering what happened to Mark and me. Did I dump him right then and there, or did I forgive him? We did not get divorced. Mark has paid a very heavy price for what he did. Every day, every single moment, he lives with the regret of that one catastrophic mistake when he chose to trust a few forged pieces of paper over trusting me. He is in therapy now, but the rules of our relationship have completely changed. Now, there is not a single decision or document in our lives, our home, or his company that does not pass through my eyes first. I gave him a second chance because I know Emma used him as a pawn and preyed on his naivety. But trust is like glass. Once it shatters, it takes years to put it back together. Just like it takes years of auditing to fix a ruined balance sheet. That was my story. A marriage that was meant to be sacrificed to a massive lie before it even began, but numbers, math, and truth redefined it. Emma tried to humiliate me at my own wedding, but in return, I handed her a jail cell where she cannot even look at her fake ledgers. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone falsely accuses you, where your entire family turns against you, always remember one thing: do not panic. Crying or screaming proves absolutely nothing. Stay calm, step back, put your emotions in a box, and gather your data. The truth is always, always recorded somewhere in a file, in a message, or in a transaction. You just need to know how to dig it up. If you love hearing strong, true, and mind-blowing stories like this, where logic always overpowers emotion and the truth wins in absolute silence. Be sure to subscribe to BookBite Studio. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments what your very first move would have been if you were in my shoes in that ballroom. I read every single comment. See you soon on BookBite Studio with another spine-chilling story.